Ladies and gentlemen, Internet, my name is Peridiam, and we are in the home stretch. Part 4 of 4, with fittingly 4 more winning games left to cover over the span of Survivor's entire history through 40 seasons. As usual, just gotta say, this series is covering the winners who were not on Winners at War, except, of course, for Tony, as you could clearly see in the thumbnail. If you missed a previous part, every other part will be in the description below if you want to find the rest. But otherwise, let's get to it. Starting off with the winner of Season 30, Survivor Worlds Apart, White Collar versus Blue Collar versus, No Collar. We have Mike Holloway, an oil driller from Texas who was placed on the 6-person blue-collar Escameca tribe. Out of the gate, Mike hit the ground running. He instantly bonded with Dan, as the two of them were presented with a conflict: think for the tribe, or think for themselves. The two of them chose to be the good guys, which I found fitting given the overall narrative Mike will have through the course of the season. Mike butted heads with another strong personality in Rodney, a young whippersnapper from Boston Rod you could say, and these two continuously had conflicts of personality. Mike was a worker, a hard worker, constantly wanted to be moving, and this occasionally rubbed the tribe the wrong way, which would then lead to arguments. A lot of arguments. Nonetheless, this blue-collar tribe didn't have to go to tribal until they were 4 episodes deep, and Mike was in a solid alliance with Dan, Kelly, and Rodney, leaving Sierra and Lindsay on the outs. To ensure an idol wouldn't be used effectively, his alliance split the vote 2-2, and out went Lindsay. Right after this, a tribe swap occurred, and Mike was placed on a 7-person tribe with 3 of the other blue collars, as well as white collars Tyler and Joaquin, and Joe, a lone no-caller. Rodney bonded with Joaquin, and this bromance would spook Mike. He didn't want Rodney to get too powerful for Mike's own good. Another pressing issue was how Kelly, another close ally of Mike's, was the only blue collar on the other swapped tribe, which meant that she would be easy pickings. However, Kelly did become a key figure on that tribe, and she did not get voted out in episode 5. However, in episode 6, Rodney had an idea to throw the challenge to vote Joe out to prevent the no-callers from getting too powerful at the merge. Mike wasn't a big fan of this idea of throwing challenges, but he went along with it. However, after the challenge was thrown, in an amusing fashion no less, Mike decided not to vote out Joe, but to vote out Joaquin instead. Oh, that is juicy. Mike recognized how close Rodney and Joaquin were with each other, and yeah, he didn't want Rodney to get any bright ideas. Mike scooped up Joe, as well as utilizing Dan and Sierra, the 2 blue collars, to vote out Joaquin, blindsiding Rodney in the process. Rodney would not forget that. Also needs to be said, Mike did a decent job of getting Sierra back on the blue-collar side after she was blindsided when Lindsay was voted out, because neither Rodney nor Dan seemed all that impressive with how they approached her. At the final 12, the tribes merged, and the blue collars had 5 members strong, alongside the remaining white collars in Carolyn and Tyler. This super alliance held the majority 7 out of 12, and they waffled between voting for Jen or Haley, 2 no-caller players. Mike ultimately called the shot here, being the leader. He picked Jen, which proved to be the wrong choice, as Jen held an idol and played it on herself, and because Kelly had flipped on her swapped allies, who were these no-callers, the no-callers all voted out Kelly, Mike's ally. However, in spite of Kelly leaving, the big alliance still held a 6-5 majority, and in fact, Will from the no-caller tribe had jumped ship already, making it 7-4. The minority no-callers were in trouble, and so they get picked off here, first starting with Haley because Joe kept winning immunity, and then Joe, who went at the final 10. Mind you, Joe tried to build a fake idol that wasn't actually half bad because he couldn't find the real idol. And that's because a round prior, Mike had managed to get Tyler to tell him the clue that Joe shared with Tyler about the location of the idol. That was a lot of names. This information that Mike manages to get from Tyler, from Joe, this information sharing would prove to be very crucial for Mike, as he used this information about the location of the idol to not only sideline Joe, framing him as if he actually found it, making everyone believe that he held it, but he would also then go on to find the actual real idol himself.
That's what we do, baby. We do the happy dance. We do the happy dance. kidding me right now?
So Joe gets voted out, and we get to the final 9, the fated final 9 round, where everything just gets blown up in Mike's face in one fell swoop. At the top of the episode, Mike discovers that Rodney had put together a new alliance of 4 between himself, Carolyn, Tyler, and Will.
This alliance would pick off Jen and Shireen.
And then at 7, they would seize the day with the numbers picking off Mike, Dan, and Sierra too. And you know what? It's actually not a bad idea. Mike overhears them scheming and decides to blow this up. But first, the auction. The last time the auction, sadly, would be seen in Survivor through 40 seasons. Mike pulls off a half-measure attempt here to game the auction when the loved one's letters come out. Basically, everyone will go up and give Jeff their money, so everyone gets a letter. However, Mike decides to go back on his word after everyone but him has given up their money. He goes back and he sits down on the bench, meaning he will have enough money to buy the advantage over everyone else. Because, of course, there's always some kind of an advantage at the auction. Mike tricks everyone here by abusing their trust. However, he then goes back on his move after the backlash he receives, and he does give up his money to get the letter. He basically gets no upside and all of the downsides with either direction he goes in. Because of this move, everyone gets pissed at him, and Rodney exacerbates the focus on Mike, rallying the majority alliance to target him next. Rodney pulls in Dan and Sierra and turns them on Mike because Mike is no longer a good guy, and the good guys gotta win, and Dan just can't support being a bad guy. But Mike wins immunity both at the final 9 and the final 8,
And so Jen and Shireen, 2 other players on the bottom, go out next.
Mike attempts a decent Russian roulette kind of vote at the final 8 too,
Bluffing about playing his idol on Shireen, but it doesn't pan out.
Good attempt though. Mike is now facing a 6-1 deficit with no allies. Literally every episode is insanity in that he is just doing the same thing over and over. Mike tries to convince Dan and Sierra again and again that Rodney is leading them off a cliff. They're screwed, but they don't really listen. Not to mention, Mike is a big threat to win anyway, so why would they really want to go to the end with him? At the final 7, Mike doesn't win immunity, but he's got that idol he found from a while ago and he plays it, securing him safety. He targets Tyler as his biggest threat to win, and so out goes Tyler. At the final 6, Mike wins immunity yet again. All that hard work is paying off. And he convinces Carolyn to wake up and smell the coffee. They're turning on her now, and so she plays her idol from the premiere episode to save herself. That said, Mike still never has any allies, but he goes on to win immunity for the rest of the way at the final 5 and the final 4, first voting off Sierra, and then tying the vote up at the final 4 to force Rodney to go to fire against Mama C. Rodney was actually a decent threat to win, but he couldn't make fire to save himself, and Mike was now in the final 3 with Mama C and Will. Mike easily trounced the other 2 by just sheer force. He won 5 immunities, tying the record, played an idol correctly, pulled off some nice blindsides, and while I wouldn't say overall his win was that high up in regard to strategy or social maneuvering or tactical finesse, it was still impressive to watch as he is the only player to this day to really win the game by just being really, really good at challenges. Blue collar strong!
The winner of Survivor, Mike.
So, now we get to season 38, Survivor Edge of Extinction, and boy oh boy, how long can I make this entry? Chris Underwood, a sales manager from South Carolina, would be the next sole survivor, but as most of us are aware, he won the game in the most unorthodox way we have ever seen. First up, Chris was placed on the 9-person Blue Manu tribe, which would be joined by 2 returning players, that of Kelly Wentworth and David Wright. Chris allied himself in the majority alliance, which held 6 strong, forcing Reem, Keith, and Wendy on the bottom. This majority was able to split their vote, and they lost the first challenge, making Reem the first one out. From there, Keith was targeted next, another player on the bottom, as Manu had quickly become another disaster tribe that was losing just about every challenge. In fact, the Manu tribe goes to every single pre-merge tribal council, even though they do get swapped around in episode 4, still, Manu was kinda cursed. So cursed, in fact, that in episode 3, on day 8, they lose their 3rd immunity challenge in a row. David was targeting Kelly, the other returning player, and he had brought in both Rick and Wendy. He just needed one more vote, and so he approached Chris, given Kelly was close with Lauren and War Dog. Chris became a bit of a swing vote between these two trios, either vote off Kelly or vote off Wendy. But Chris wanted to keep his options open going forward. He didn't want to vote off Kelly, only to just lose trust with War Dog and Lauren, so he approached War Dog to keep the guy in the loop. This, however, may have been a fatal mistake, as War Dog trusted Kelly over Chris. He viewed Kelly as a bigger shield than Chris, and so he went back and he rallied Wentworth and Lauren, only to then approach Rick and soon David. And what did he do? He targeted Chris. Chris became the target, and now David and Rick were in the middle. They ultimately decided to join forces with the other trio, as the tribe swap was right around the corner, and they knew this, and they would rather have a strong tribe, a unified tribe, heading into that than a fractured one. Basically, everyone was on the same page except for Wendy, and, well, what's new? So, by a vote of 5-2, Chris Underwood was voted out unceremoniously as the third boot of Survivor Edge of Extinction. So now let's get to season 39, Survivor Island of the... Okay, nope, it's not over just yet. The season is called The Edge of Extinction for a reason, so what happens next is that Chris, who just got voted out, gets sent to a small beach for basically the rest of the game, where he hangs out until he either re-enters the main game at the merge or at the final 6. Chris is joined by everyone else who gets voted off. What's up, Rick Devens? And he becomes a pretty good provider for this Edge tribe. He catches a stingray, he ponders about his imperfect game, about the concept of failure. He really reflects on himself and his loss, and he looks inward on how he's going to recover from there. He then fails to re-enter the game at the merge, losing to Rick in the challenge, and so back to the Edge he goes. At this point, we can basically fast forward to day 35, with 5 players left in the game. Chris gets that second chance to re-enter, and voila, he wins the challenge, even beating out the likes of Joe, I should mention, the biggest challenge beast in Survivor history. Chris re-enters the game after being voted out on day 8. It's now day 35, and off we go. He reconnects with Rick Devens, who's also on the bottom, and they join forces. Rick is holding an idol, and he plans to play it at the next vote if he doesn't win immunity, which he doesn't. Chris also held a half idol, where if he survived the final 6 vote, it would become a full idol at the final 5. Ridiculously powerful, but whatever. He gives the other half to Rick to hold on to. Chris also approaches Lauren from his original Manu tribe way back when, and he knows that she's holding an idol too. He convinces her to work with him and have her play the idol on him tonight, ensuring he survives to the final 5 so the two of them can work together to the end. Because Chris wasn't a huge threat. He'd barely been in the game. He had yet to even meet Victoria, Julie, or Gavin, the other half of this tribe. Chris also knew about Lauren's idol because Kelly brought it up on the Edge, and he also knew that Kelly wanted Lauren to make a big move. She hadn't yet, and this was her chance. Save Chris. Get Victoria out, the biggest threat left. So she did. She played her idol on him, and now he was locked into the final 4, given Rick gave the other half of Chris's idol back at the final 5. This is a lot of idol talk. Chris had a full idol to play on himself, and when Rick won immunity, it was guaranteed that he was getting votes. He got 3, but he played his idol, and yeah, out went Lauren, as Rick played his idol on Gavin, and Julie... well, I don't believe Julie was perceived as a big threat to win. At the final 4, Chris won immunity and was locked into the final 3, but he had intended for all of this to be the case. At the final 5, he did not want to win immunity, so he threw the challenge to play the idol knowing he was safe. But now, at the final 4, he wanted to win immunity, and he did, just so that he could do what he was about to do.
When I got voted out the first time, I got blindsided. And I am not going to let that happen again.
Trust your gut.
I feel like I'm at a high-stakes poker table, and I have a hand that might win, but it also might not. So I might have to be just flat-out daring. Stick all my chips in and let whatever happens gonna happen. All bets are off. It's for $1 million, man. It's the biggest risk I'm taking. So tonight, I am offering up my immunity necklace, giving it to Julie, and I will be making fire against Rick Devens tonight.
Wow. Chris beasted that fire, and he beat Rick, knocking him out landing Chris in the final 3 with Julie and Gavin. And for me personally, I'm of two minds about all of this. This is both impressive in execution, but I don't give a ton of kudos to Chris only because it was planned over on the edge, mostly by Wardog from what I've heard, and it was basically Chris's road to victory to even stand a chance to win. However, like I just said, on the other hand, Chris did pull it off, and it was fun to watch, and the jury was eating it up, and hey, if that's what the jury wants, that's what the jury's gonna reward. Chris validated most of the jury by being in the shoes they wished they were in. He sold his case to win rather well, and ultimately won the game 9-4-0 over Gavin and Julie, being the first player to ever get voted out and then go on to still win the same season. Didn't think I could say that much about Chris, but hey, there was something.
The winner of Survivor, Edge of Extinction, Chris. That's enough.
Season 39, Island of the Idols. We get Tommy Sheehan, a teacher, one of the more noteworthy players in that he won the game without winning immunity or finding an idol or having an idol played on him or any advantage, and he didn't even have to make a fire. Tommy is the antithesis of everything modern Survivor stands for and tries to push, and I find that amusing. Tommy began on the 10-person Purple Vokai tribe, which would prove to be the more dominant tribe of the season. Right away, he formed strong bonds with Lauren as well as Jack. Tommy had ingratiated himself well with most of the tribe to where he wasn't a target and was situated comfortably in the middle. A 3-person alliance of Jamal, Jack, and Molly had made their way to the top of the hierarchy, and so at the second tribal council, a resistance was formed to upset the apple cart, knocking them off the top. Tommy became a swing vote to join Jason, Nora, Kelly, Lauren, basically the rest of the tribe. Originally, the vote was to be split between Jason and Nora, the two outsiders, but the vote flipped on the cool kids and out went Molly. From here, Tommy was swapped onto an 8-person tribe with 4 Vokai and 4 Lyro, meaning the vote would likely get tied. In episode 6, Tommy went back to tribal after staying strong with Lauren, Dan, and Jason. These 4 would vote for Elaine, all while getting closer to Elizabeth, Missy, and Aaron, with the hope of flipping Aaron to make the vote 5-3. The problem here for Tommy was that Elaine received an advantage from the Island of the Idols, which meant that she could block a vote, and so her group blocked Jason, meaning Tommy was exposed and could have been voted out. They targeted Jason, instead sending him home instead of Tommy 4-3, but man was this a close call. And then we get to the merge. Possibly my least favorite episode in all of Survivor. Things get ugly. The tribes merge, and Vokai have the numbers 7-6. Not only that, but they're all close enough to join back together. At first, Tommy speaks with Kelly about creating a new alliance of 9, merging some from Vokai and some from Lyro, but Kelly doesn't really care for this idea. It doesn't work that well for her. Tommy feels like he's not as secure as he had hoped with his fringe Vokai allies, and he notices that Kelly is getting close to Missy, a player Tommy was intending to target. He works closely with Lauren, and together they begin to doubt if Kelly is with them. From here, the game begins to steer in an unprecedented direction, one which Tommy is mostly not shown to be a part of. A series of events involving inappropriate touching from Dan, an ally of Tommy's, towards Kelly, leads to Janet sticking up for Kelly and then working to get Dan out. Janet pulls in what she believes is a majority to take out Dan because screw that guy. She gets Jamal, she gets Karishma, she gets Nora, she gets Kelly. They form together and expect to also have Missy and Elizabeth at the very least. This would give numbers to override Tommy's swing vote position, but this vote doesn't work out for Janet as Missy and Elizabeth believe they were being fooled. It's a very complicated moment that leads to this merge being very difficult to watch, but Tommy sides with the alliance to take out Kelly, and she doesn't play either of her 2 idols that she's holding, and she goes out 8-5. After this vote, Tommy's comfortably in the middle, relatively distanced from the fallout of the merge vote and all that it entailed. His alliance splits the vote on Janet and Jamal, getting Janet to play an idol, and then at the final 11, the merge tribe gets split into 2. Tommy is placed alongside Elaine, Karishma, Elizabeth, and Missy, the 4 Lyro women, and it would appear he is in a lot of hot water, seeing as both tribes are forced to attend tribal. Karishma had no love for Missy or Elizabeth, particularly Missy, and Elaine was feeling it too. She liked Karishma and Tommy, and once Missy targeted Tommy, yeah, it was a no-go. Tommy was closer to Elaine than others realized, and while he received 2 votes here, Missy received 3, sending her packing. These would be the only 2 votes Tommy received against him all season, despite not being immune at any point. At the final 9, the 2 split tribes form back together as one, and Lauren finds the idol and shares the info with Tommy. These 2 are still in lockstep.
Nora or Elizabeth have to win.
Why?
If they win, I get an idol.
So right now, I'm Lauren's wingman. I'm gonna do whatever I can to make sure Lauren gets that idol. So I wanna get as many people I can to not play. So what are we gonna talk about all day long right now? Pancakes, syrup, bacon, coffee. And the more I talk about it, the more Lauren talks about it, the less people to compete against Nora or Elizabeth.
Wow, 6 people gonna eat, only 3 people. Karishma, Nora, and Elizabeth will compete.
Oh my God, did we actually just pull this off?
They also sit in the middle of a big majority alliance who form back together and leave Elizabeth and Karishma on the outs. The target was Karishma, but they cast a stray vote for Elizabeth just in case of any funny business, and they misled Karishma to vote for Janet. Karishma does play an idol, but that was okay. Elizabeth just goes instead. And then they vote out Karishma in the next vote. Those 4 Lyra women who swapped with Tommy at the split vote are just, man, they're just getting taken out one by one. On that note, it's the final 7, and Tommy has a majority alliance with Lauren, Dan, Dean, and Janet. Nora consistently becomes the scapegoat for the players on the bottom, and Elaine gets fooled into believing she is the majority when she isn't, as she gets voted out 5-2 for being very likable and an easy shoo-in to win the game. Most likely from here, Tommy's plan was to take Dean and Dan to the final 3, which I believe he easily wins, targeting Janet next at the final 6, and then either of Lauren or Nora at the final 5, but all of a sudden, midway through the final 6 round, Dan is ejected from the game for more inappropriate touching, this time of a production crew member. Dan instantly leaves, and now Tommy is in the final 5. With Janet still being the target, the big issue is that she holds an idol. However, Dean had an idol nullifier advantage from the Island of the Idols, which he used against Janet, preventing her from saving herself and sending her out. At the final 4, Nora won immunity, and Tommy convinced her that sending him to fire to take out Lauren, the biggest threat remaining, would be a bad move, as Tommy was bad at making fire. Except Tommy wasn't bad at it. He just didn't want to risk losing when he felt comfortable enough to win the game regardless. He just had to reach the final 3. Nora decided to save Tommy and take him with her to the final tribal, watching as Dean beat Lauren in the fire making. Nora never really stood a chance to win here, and in some respects, the final tribal was a battle of old school Survivor and Tommy versus new school with Dean. Dean had a lot of advantages, but was consistently on the bottom, never really calling the shots, while Tommy was well positioned at just about every point. He argued his case well at the final tribal council, and he won 8 of the 10 jury votes, beating out Dean and Nora, demonstrating that you really don't need to make a fire or find an idol or win an advantage even 39 seasons deep. You can still just sway the vote your way each round, win people over through connections, being likable, and position yourself at the core of so many others' plans despite being the most likely to win. And I will always drink to that.
The winner of Survivor, Tommy.
And now, we get to the big kahuna, the biggest kahuna of them all. We have Survivor, Season 40, Winners at War. With the man with the master plan, we have Tony Vlachos 2.0, or, well, 3.0, but a second win, now being the second player to win twice, cementing himself as arguably the greatest player of all time, the ultimate GOAT, if you will. That's going to confuse some people. We all know Tony, we just saw his game, the latest of the bunch as of this video, but let's cover the basics. His road to victory, yet again, one more time. Tony entered the season with a huge target on his back, and he was very aware of it. Didn't go so well in his second season, Game Changers, and this time around, he intended to downplay his threat level. He knew that he was going to be all over the place, so if he could just rein it in, he may blend in enough to stick around for at least the first few votes, and get overlooked, believe it or not, ingratiate well socially, and then go sprinting through the Fijian jungles at light speed. Which is kind of what happened. Tony connected with Sandra and Sarah early on, reigniting Cops R Us with Sarah, the most important alliance of the season. The first vote, he was in the majority, splitting the votes between Amber and Kim, sending Amber packing. Tony was laying low, wasn't out going crazy searching for idols like last time, he had refrained from building a spy shack or a bunker just yet, and it was kind of working. He actually did build a ladder, which may have been a preemptive nod towards his next spy shelter, but either way, his ladder led to many antics as players used it to climb trees and gather resources. In episode 4, Tony was being targeted, but Tyson kind of shot himself in the foot by targeting Sandra. The rest of the tribe wasn't having it, and even though Tony was wanting lesser threats out, Tyson went next. And so the tribe swap hit, and Tony was placed on a tribe of 5, alongside his ally Sandra, and then Kim, Denise, and Jeremy. Kim was gravitating toward Jeremy and Denise, and Tony did get a little manic here, attempting his spy shack shenanigans, but he was socially connected with Denise and Jeremy as much as Kim was. After his connection with Sarah, it could be argued his connection with Jeremy was the second most important of the season. In episode 6, Sandra overplays her hand and pays the price, as she wants Denise to turn on Jeremy with her idol. Denise instead sends Sandra packing, the Queen Slayer, and Tony was amusingly the only person in this tribe to not have any sort of advantage on him. Yet, he skated on by to the merge. Yes, indeed, in an all-winner season, Tony Vlachos made the merge. At the merge, Tony rallied the big threats together to take out the small ones. 2 swap tribes, Dekal and Yara, formed together to take out Sele, targeting Wendell first. This was great for Tony as it freed up Jeremy and took out a smaller threat player, allowing his quote-unquote lion alliance of big threats to remain intact. From here, Adam gets railroaded, especially given he was trying to turn on Sarah, but that didn't happen. And at the final 10, all hell broke loose when Jeremy abandoned ship and used his advantage to leave tribal, giving Tony a numbers advantage. He worked alongside Sophie, Nick, Ben, and Sarah, who also stole Denise's vote, and they turned on Tyson. This gave them a 5-strong vote, or a 6-strong, although Michelle was also on board after all of the chaos, even allowing a split vote to occur, flushing Kim's idol in the process. From here, we get to the final 9, the famous final 9 vote, where Tony really begins to shine like never before. This is the Tony episode through and through. He finds an idol, overcomes a disadvantage, wins immunity, pulls off an incredible blindside. Michelle, Jeremy, Kim, and Denise were on the bottom. Tony attempts to play double agent with the minority, and this attempt splits them in half as Jeremy gravitates closer to Tony than anyone else. Tony also gets extorted here by Natalie on the edge. He has to basically run around and collect a bunch of fire tokens before the challenge, which was pretty amusing, and he manages to succeed too. Hopefully this disadvantage never returns. Kim and Denise then join the majority 5, and they leave Michelle and Jeremy to the wayside. With the vote 7-2, the 7 can split their numbers 4-3 or 5-2, and thus Jeremy and Michelle are dead in the water. But that's where Tony comes in. He convinces Nick to join him in rallying Jeremy and Michelle, and suddenly it's no longer a majority split vote and instead a coup. Tony blindsides Sophie 4-3-2, removing her from the board just as he would do this in Kageon, flipping at the odd votes, trimming the fat from his alliance, pulling Sarah in closer than before. Sarah goes ballistic on him, but he weathers her storm. Kim gets taken out next despite wanting to target Tony, but of course, Tony was on an immunity streak. From the final 10 to the final 8, Tony won 3 straight immunities, almost enabling him to play this risky. Triple threat, yeah?
My wife told me, Tony, this time you can't play wild, you can't play crazy, you can't play flashy. But I got the itch, and now this is the time for another undercover operation. In my first season, season 28 in Kageyan, I made a spy shack and it worked. And then, Game Changers, my second season, I made them underground bunker. It was a failure, but it was fun. Right now, my spying has evolved, and now I'm up in the air. It's called the spy nest. It's like a bird nest that I perch myself on just like a bird, and I sit there and I wait to hear conversations that are going on.
At the final 7, Tony turns on Jeremy, splitting the vote between him and Michelle. Again, he scoops people up for a quick vote, and then once they've had their use, he kind of moves on. Michelle plays her 50-50 coin, which, I gotta say, by the way, Tony had also given Jeremy his idol to hold onto in the previous round to keep Jeremy closer to him, similar to Michelle giving him her coin. Jeremy plays neither, but it was a nice touch by both of them to win over Jeremy's loyalty going forward. At Final 6, Tony has formed a core 4 with Sarah, Ben, and Denise, and so they take out Nick. all while Michelle is kicking Nick for not taking out Ben the previous round when he had the chance. And because the Edge of Extinction was still in play this season, Natalie, the first boot of the season, returns, similar to Chris from season 38, and held a full-fledged idol, unlike Chris from season 38. The idea was to split the vote, 2 for Nat and 2 for Michelle, but Michelle won immunity, really clutch by the way, and so craziness ensued. Tony, Ben, and Natalie all played idols, Michelle was safe, and so Denise had to get sent packing as Sarah was much closer to Tony and Ben and even Michelle and Natalie. Tony won immunity at the final 5, launching him to the final 4, and he targeted Michelle, but Sarah flipped her vote to make a big move to take out Ben instead. This flummoxed Tony. He wasn't in the driver's seat with this endgame, and once Natalie won immunity at 4, he was pitted against Sarah in fire making, which he almost lost. But in the end, he had to send Sarah packing, his closest ally all season, in a heartbreaking moment on night 38. Tony defeated Natalie and Michelle by a vote of 12 to 4 to 0. His win didn't really seem in doubt from the jury's perspective. He did a great job of coming across as humble, expressing himself with an air of humility. He was tactically brilliant. He really focused on the little things all season that paved the way for success in the big picture. Tony was still all over the place in many respects. Up in the trees, over in the bushes, down on the sand, sometimes being at the mercy of others, other times calling shot after shot. But in the end, he defeated 19 other champions to claim the title of sole survivor for an all-winner season, and I think that alone says it all.
The winner of Survival Winners at War, Tony. Congratulations, Tony.
And after all is said and done, through 8 videos and 2 series over 2 months, 8 weeks, we now have 40 winning games before us. I just want to say thank you guys for making it this far to the end of part 4, or really part 8. This was a huge endeavor that I did not entirely anticipate doing at the beginning of the year, but I am so glad that I now have. I want to thank you guys for encouraging me, because initially I wasn't planning on spending an entire month after Winners at War continuously talking about all the other winners, but when you guys showed me the support and wanted to do it, I said, you know what? Let's do it. So again, thank you for tuning in. Let me know what you think about these 4 winners, as well as just all of them. But in the end, my name is still Peridiam. I'm saying thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to win all of your wars on your way out. And I will see you in the next one once I, maybe go make like an ultimate cut version with like all 40 roads to victory in one video. Should I do that? We'll see.
This really is America. Who here feels I am a no-caller? And that is part of it, right? Feeling free, you're tattooing your body.
Yeah, doing what you want to do.
So whose philosophy is the best one? White collar, blue collar, no collar? America.
America.